4, 3, 2, 1. I told you before to be careful where you put your legs.
I was only trying to be helpful.
I can help myself. What are you waiting for? Come on. Come on. What are you waiting for? Come on. Come on.
For 7 decades, Michael Caine has been among the world's most renowned and recognisable actors.
It was just what I needed. A 1-inch god with a 2-inch penis.
The star of classics like Zulu, The Man Who Would Be King, and The Cider House Rules.
It's a miracle no one was killed.
But also films that brought his career to the brink of complete implosion.
I made a mistake.
Somehow, he has always found a way back.
You're a big man, but you're in bad shape. With me, it's a full-time job.
In this epic podcast series, we will watch and review every Michael Caine movie, from the greatest hits
You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off.
to the incredible misses,
You failed to maintain your weapon, son.
and take a deep dive into the life and work of one of the world's most recognisable film stars.
His name is Michael Caine, and no one will forget his name.
To understand how he has made the mark of Caine.
Well, you all settled in? Right, we can begin. For God's sake, come in.
Hello and welcome to the Mark of Caine podcast, our ongoing bog snorkel through the film career of Michael Caine, focusing on a film in every episode in an attempt to get to the bottom of the appeal of a screen legend whose CV, while containing a string of classics, also contains enough poison to kill off the careers of a dozen other actors. I'm Michael Foley, and I'm joined as always by Stephen Black of the Mallow News Twitter feed. Like a little start-up factory of satire and amusing diversions. Jeez, amusing diversions. I feel like I'm starting to sound like one of those old being for the benefit of Mr. Kite type Victorian posters for upcoming amusements. How are you doing?
I'm alive. I guess that's about as much as I can ask for at this stage.
Are you putting any of that kind of sort of lag and mood down to the movie we're about to talk about, or are you still post Alfie?
I'm kind of post-20, all right. Yeah, it's this is. I was hoping for a bit of an all. I was hoping for my boosh to be well amused on the wrong box, and unfortunately, it was not amused. It wasn't even slightly amused. It was amused-lesh.
Yeah, it wasn't even booshed. So we're coming off the mixed bag that was Alfie, the towering success that was Alfie, even though it was in a completely repulsive movie, to something entirely different now for Michael Caine. So a couple of months after Alfie came out in March 1966, his summer offering in May of 1966 was a film called The Wrong Box.
In the name of the Queen.
That's one out of the way.
You heard me, man. Fire!
And that's yet another.
Pray, what is going on?
What's going on? Murder and mayhem is going on in the wrong box. It started here, when a room full of young hopefuls gathered to hear about the tontine. And pray, what is a tontine?
A tontine is, in point of fact, a lottery.
A lottery, plain and simple, in which the man who lives longest wins. Of 20 beneficiaries, only 2 brothers remain alive. But which one of them will stay alive to collect the tontine, now worth £100,000?
Now, this is, to me, it's a deeply odd film. It's a 60s comedy farce, a British comedy farce, based on a Robert Louis Stevenson novel. I'm not quite sure this was exactly what we were all crying out for in the summer of 66, was it?
I don't think anyone is ever going to be crying out for a movie like this ever. I fucking hate farces at the best of times. And this is really didn't do anything to change my mind. I'm a traditionalist when it comes to comedies. I'm a meeting to it. I like my comedies to be funny. And unfortunately, this doesn't kind of meet that very, very strict criteria of, having moments of levity sprinkled throughout the film in order to keep the viewer engaged. It's quite frankly, it's a mess. And I don't know about you, but it's not only the wrong box, but the wrong movie for Michael Caine to be making off the back of Alfie.
A very strange choice. Like, it's so strange that I went back and I just kind of looked at the timeline of this because, part of this whole kind of exploration of Caine is how does he manage to make these hugely either commercially successful, even in the case of Alfie, if it's just an awful, horrible film, but it's hugely successful and it sets him up, and then goes and like this is the first now. This is the first real Troy McClure moment. The contabulous fabtraction of Dr. Horatio Huffnagel has just landed with the wrong box. So, like, I went back and looked at the timeline just to see what was the thinking here. So, The Wrong Box was filmed in September 1965, okay? That was just after the Ipcress file would have come out just a little bit earlier in June 1965. It came out in May 1966. Alfie would have come out in March 1966, having been filmed kind of in between Ipcress coming out and Caine doing The Wrong Box. He filmed it in June 65. So basically what we're saying is that Alfie wasn't big at all, right? He wasn't... When he committed to doing The Wrong Box and went working on The Wrong Box, Alfie still wasn't big, but the Ipcress file had come out, right? So why would he have said yes to this rubbish? Even though Alfie wasn't huge, I can only hope, and I don't know, what do you think? Do you think he would have done this like if Alfie had already been huge?
To be honest with you, without kind of spoiling upcoming episodes, all you need to do is have one quick look at his filmography and kind of to discern that he doesn't really seem to put an awful lot of thought into the movies that he picks at the best of times. So I think this is so early on in his career, he could be forgiven for thinking, right, I need to take every role I can get because I may never work again. I'm in my 30s. I'm a late bloomer, as it were. So you could be forgiven for that. But I mean, he put this down to, again, choosing a film based on the pedigree of the people involved, which is not the best approach to take when you're picking a movie. Some people might go so far as reading the script to find out if it's any good.
You don't think you read the script?
I don't think he read the script at all, no. I think he saw Brian Forbes' name attached, was looking at Whistle Down the Wind, was looking at John Mills and Ralph Richardson. I think, old English movie royalty. This is a good opportunity for my name to appear on the marquee next to them. And comedy, I've not done an out-and-out comedy yet. It's going to be a good chance for me to exercise my muscles. Unfortunately, to be honest with you, I don't think he has those muscles. He certainly doesn't have those muscles now. It's a very weak performance by him in a role that's not suited to his range.
Yeah,
he is. I mean, the character. We'll go into the plot, but the character that he plays here is essentially a kind of a milksop, a kind of a very, I suppose, a very weak kind of wishy-washy character who doesn't really have an awful lot to do or a lot to say.
He's part of an ensemble cast. Like, I mean, you mentioned Mills and Richardson there, obviously being the kind of the main men. You also have, Peter Cook and Dudley Moore. It's their first movie. You have Tony Hancock turns up, and you various other kind of familiar faces from British comedy films of the time.
In a way, it's like this is fucking cinema through the 60s and 70s is littered with fucking ensemble attempts like this to you get enough people who you think are funny onto the screen, you think that's automatically going to make the comedy happen, and time after time it doesn't work. Just because you have funny people, the things they have to say have to be funny as well. It's not just their funny bones are going to somehow fucking make simmer in the stock of your shit stew and still come out tasting good at the end of it.
This is like this is kind of like this is kind of like the curse of the supergroup. You get all these kind of, this is the air supply of 60s movies.
This is free base. This is free base. This is fucking just, all good component parts of the original groups that they were in, and then all of a sudden you add them together. It's like, no, nobody needs 4 bass players in a group, lads.
No, absolutely not. And this is kind of really what unfolds. It's not good. It's not good. I'm going to run through the plot. Unless you have anything else, we'll just get into the plot. And I'm going to apologize in advance. I mean, I started kind of jotting this out, okay? And we've done the Ipcress file, which was quite complex to explain. And then we got into this ridiculous farce. So I'm going to try and get through this as quick as I can. But this is plotsy as any Harry Palmer, right? But anyway, let's go. So, The Wrong Box. The whole premise of the thing is a tontine. Tontine has been organised for 20 young rich boys whose families put in £1,000 each. So a tontine meaning that the last surviving member of this group gets all the loot, right? So at the very beginning of the movie, we see a succession of ludicrous deaths. So the ones that stuck out to me was a guy supervising a duel, getting shot by both duelists. That jumps to mind. Leonard Rossiter played him. Actually, Nicholas Parsons pops up as well. He's another one who gets it pretty early on. Jeremy Lloyd, who would have written Allo, Allo and Are You Being Served afterwards, gets blown to bits by his own cannon at the Battle of Balaclava. I might come back to that one actually later on, but so it boils down in the end to two brothers, Masterson Finsbury, who's played by John Mills, and Joseph Finsbury, who's played by Ralph Richardson, who was a great English actor of the year. I would remember him from the old epic The Four Feathers, so I remember him. Caine, he plays Mills's medical student grandson, Michael Finsbury, as Stephen has said. He's just a complete sop. He's kind of useless, really. And Joseph has two grandsons who are played by Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, and this is their first movie appearance. There's also cousin Julia, who lives in Joseph's house. She's played by Nanette Newman, who's the woman from the Fairy Liquid advert, basically, for people of a certain age will remember. And Caine, of course, has a thing for her, even though they're cousins. Now, with the Tontine almost concluded, we've got two guys left, and Masterman now apparently dying. Joseph gets a telegram summoning him back from his holidays in Bournemouth. They live a couple of doors down from each other, but they haven't spoken in years. So Joseph is on the train back with the grandsons. He manages to escape them and gets mixed up with someone called the Bournemouth Strangler, who ends up getting his coat. There's a train crash. The Strangler dies, but because he's wearing Joseph's coat and he's mangled, the grandsons think it's their grandfather's after dying. So they hide the body in the woods nearby with plans to post it to London. Who knows why? And they're going to get a bogus death cert from a dodgy doctor called Dr. Pratt. Now, at this point, they make a joke about backstreet abortions because Dudley Moore in this is a bit of a Mr. Loverman in this movie. So therefore, he knows Dr. Pratt from previous, and presumably because he needed him to get him to perform a hilarious abortion at some stage. That's how he knows him. Meanwhile, Joseph himself has wandered off, hitches a lift to London. Back in London, Caine gets a telegram telling him to expect a statue in a box. Cook arrives at Caine's house to see the dying man, Masterman, and decides to hide his grandfather's body long enough for Masterman to die, and therefore then they can claim the Tontine. Dudley Moore is left in charge of posting the body, but of course it happens to get mixed up with the box containing the statue that's going to Caine's house, hence the wrong box. So the body ends up at Masterman's house, and this statue ends up at Peter Cook's house. So Joseph arrives at his brother Masterman's house. Masterman tries to kill him a couple of times, fails. Cook arrives home just in time to see the box that he assumes has the body in it being delivered of his grandfather. And he heads off then to Dr. Pratt's house, who's played by Peter Sellers, to get a fake death cert. In the meantime, Caine is helping move the box into Joseph's house, where cousin Julia is swooning about. Turns out that she's an orphan whose father, who was a missionary, was eaten by cannibals, so some casual colonial racism sprinkled in there. So suddenly they're not cousins, so they're free to, ogle each other's ankles or whatever. Michael gets home. Okay, so we're in the editing suite, also known as my brother's kitchen, and we're getting really, really bored listening to this plot. So in short, look, the film is total pants. You don't need to know any more of the plot to get stuck into the rest of this conversation. So what we're going to do, we're just going to skip ahead to the bit where I say, ta-da! And that's the wrong box. Ta-da!
So again, to be fair to this movie, it's very hard when you're kind of forensically describing what happened in a movie, especially a comedy, and make it sound like it's not funny. But don't worry, it's not funny at all. So hearing it kind of be played back to you like this doesn't in any way make it less entertaining, because it's as entertaining as the description makes it out. It's muck.
It is muck.
Let's start. We'll get through this fucking turd fest fairly quickly here now. We'll just fucking. Like a teenager afraid their parents about to come home, we'd kind of knock this one out as quickly as possible. So the opening sequence lets you know that you're really in for a roller coaster of terribly directed and edited whimsy. This whole kind of, you would have thought a prime opportunity for a bit of slapstick. All the original members and descendants of the members of the Tontine are killed off in various hilarious ways, as Michael has said. And just the timing is dreadful, the acting is awful, and the way that it's cut is awful. Brian Forbes has a tin ear for comedy. Long-standing issue I have is directors that kind of float from genre to genre. I think they can just dip their toe into something like comedy or horror as well. That's another one. I just think that it's easy. You just have to get in there, film what's on the script, and it's as simple as that. It's not. Comedy is one of the hardest genres to get right. And if you look at it, I maintain some of the best directors in the world, they at least have one good comedy. But that's a mark of an excellent director, is that if they can do comedies and they can do other genres, that's what makes them at the top of their game. But Brian Forbes is not at the top of his game. I don't think he was ever at the top of his game. He's a fucking. No. He got lucky with a couple of good kind of scripts through his life. Like Stepford Wives is not funny. It's not a good movie. I think it's more the plot or the notion of a Stepford wife is entered into the lexicon.
Exactly. It's got the Alfie effect. It's just kind of because of the name and the kind of the character, and as you said, the phrase. But he's just dire. He's just poor. Sorry, carry on.
Then you start to limp through the film, and Dudley Moore and Peter Cook are like. I have a lot of time for the sketches that they did, but two things I could never understand. If you start today as young people, millennials or Generation Z or A1 or whatever the fuck they're called these days, and show them a picture of Dudley Moore and said, this man was a sex symbol. He made a number of very successful sex comedies in the late 70s and 80s. They'd think that you were on drugs.
Yeah, probably.
And this is guy that's playing it. I don't know who decided that, you know what, he's short. He looks like he should be on a quest to take a ring to a volcano. They
were never built. They were never built for films. Like, I mean, Dudley Moore did his thing. Peter Cook was never built for films. Even though films are bigger on the screen is bigger, the actual medium is smaller for a guy like him. And I mean, you can see, like, I'm a big Peter Cook fan. He just makes me laugh, right? But all his movies, you just feel like he's been restricted. I mean, he's just playing it completely for laughs. He's got the great accent, and but everything is over the top. It's too over the top.
Should even Peter Cook, the one vehicle that they had, the two of them had was a Bedazzled.
That was the next
an awful car crash of a movie as well. Peter Cook, like, I wouldn't be as big a fan of him as you, but he never really made the transition from TV to movies. The role is so one note. All he does is sneer throughout the movie. There's no kind of nuance. I'd say no chance to. He doesn't get the same latitude that someone like Peter Sellers got in the movie. The only funny, in my opinion, the only funny piece of the movie is when Peter Cook goes to visit Dr. Pratt, played by Peter Sellers, and Peter Sellers just blows everyone else off the screen in terms of he knows exactly what he's doing. He knows exactly how to be funny on screen.
He takes whatever was on the page, which was alcoholic doctor, washed up, living with a load of cats, and he just by sheer presence, like you say, he just knows how to be funny on screen. I mean, he at one stage he signs the death cert, and he picks up the cat and he uses him to dry the ink on the page, and that 5 seconds was the funniest 5 seconds in the whole film by a country mile. And it just, like, in a way, having Sellers in it, I presume, was a huge selling point in the 60s, but it actually amplifies how bad the rest of the movie is.
Yes,
you see someone who knows what they're doing it, and then you look at the rest and go, lads, you're awful.
Like Sellers, there was one particular line that just cracked me up. It was the way that he said the line, I was not always as you see me now, and it's just a bit.
Yeah.
But that's like 5 seconds in a 2.5 hour movie, or 1 hour and 40 minutes. Sorry, I always go for these films feel like 2 hours, but it's only an hour and 40 minutes. But Jesus God, time goes backwards in this. This is some sort of fucking quantum realm. You just kind of go, this is constantly watching the. Is it over yet? Is it over yet? No, there's somehow more time than there was the last time I looked at my watch.
Yeah, he's way out on his own. Caine, for me, to get to the nub of Caine's performance, right? He's got the posh accent again, but he's far too timid for my liking. And you know what? I'm cutting him all sorts of slack in this. I'm watching this movie going, he's not a starring role. It's an ensemble piece. He's restricted within that role, but it's really poor. Do you know what he reminds me of? He reminds me of Bromhead from Zulu post Rourke's Drift. Like, the PTSD is kicked in, and he's just completely sucked dry of any sort of life. He's living from moment to moment.
I would say probably like Bromhead, only what I'd imagine the opium addiction and the descent into alcoholism as well.
Fair enough. I mean, I'm presuming, like we said at the top, I'm assuming he did this movie because he was good mates with Brian Forbes, and he saw the cast and went, wow. Like, I mean, the last time he was on film with John Mills. He actually didn't make it onto film because he was cast in a bit part with Mills in a film some years previously, but Mills actually had him fired from the set for being too tall. The first scene they had to do together, John Mills came away and said, "Sorry, I can't act while looking up." Now, he insisted Caine got paid in full, but he got rid of him. Now, they became friends afterwards. But, I suppose he probably looked at the list here and went, yeah, like you said, yeah, I'll do that. But, I'm cutting him all sorts of slack, and I cannot get away from the fact that it's just a really poor performance from him.
Yeah, I didn't realise that John Mills was part spaniel. Dogs can't look up now. They can John Mills.
Apparently so.
Or is it like one of those it's like an emperor penguin in the Faroe Islands? Does he fall over when he looks up just too far?
It's a Caine anecdote, so I mean you can take it whatever way you want.
As you say, it's an ensemble piece. I'd say Peter Cook is on screen more than Michael Caine is for this one. Like, putting aside that Nanette Newman is, I think at the time was Brian Forbes' wife. Do you notice this? It just seemed to be completely. It was just, it was really off-putting. And then there's this kind of bizarre slow motion wooing scene in the movie. Michael Caine's character is helping move the wrong box, the eponymous wrong box down the stairs. She catches a glimpse of his bare bicep. And I said, bicep, I've seen spaghetti with more protein on it. Gets so aroused by this that she flees. Michael Caine's character, seeing his chance, runs up the stairs in slow motion to her. And there's a lot of very kind of very broad acting here now. And there's one scene as they're getting closer and closer to each other, they cut in on him, and he's supposed to look as if he's been smitten by Cupid's arrow or whatever. He looks like he's going to kill her. He looks like the next natural progression is he's going to start strangling her. And then the inevitable, again, era appropriate docking sequence where they kiss. This vacuum seal is forward each mouth in order to make sure that the passengers from the pod can get into the space station.
Yeah, it's awful. It's awful, and it's so 60s. And I was trying to figure out why is this? What? When I say it's so 60s, the music was bad, the slow motion bit was bad.
The title cards. Why did they use title cards? So they use these kind of silent movie title cards to introduce different parts of the film. But it's like they forgot about it as a conceit after the first 20 minutes, and then they remembered it and throw in like 3 within the space of 5 minutes towards the end of the movie.
That's right.
The fucking butler, Jesus Christ!
Oh.
Like if there was a fucking scintilla of humor in this, he sucked it out like a fucking humor vampire. His line delivery was so slow, and it was like waiting for him to. There was any good director would go, listen, what you're doing, can you bring it down by 100%? And when you get to 0, can you bring that down by another 50% there? In fact. What you could do is leave the set. I think that's going to really improve your performance. We're going to recast this role entirely. It was fucking diabolical.
The butler is played by Wilfred Lawson, who Caine speaks about a little bit in one of his books. He says, that Wilfred Lawson was getting on in years. Now, getting on in years, by the way, I looked him up. I mean, the guy was, I think he might have been in his 70s, late 60s or something. But Forbes had set up some shots with Lawson so that Caine would move towards him, and then you would just see them kind of from chest height up. So underneath the camera, Caine was kind of had his hand on his arm, moving Wilfred into position. I think Wilfred, his career was kind of affected a bit by his affection for the booze. So Caine recalled afterwards, like that, sometime probably before The Wrong Box, he had run into Wilfred Lawson in a club in London. He was there with a script, like at the bar. Seemed to be learning lines, and Caine went over and kind of engaged in a bit of chat and said, when are you opening, and he said 8 o'clock tonight. So it was all a bit panicky from Wilfred's side of things. It was actually his last role before he passed away. He died of a heart attack, but he is like, and he's meant to be playing a decrepit butler, and he's really meant to be a springboard for a lot of the humor in this, but I mean, he's as much a springboard now as a plank is. It just does not bounce. The lines do not bounce.
No, it's like he absorbs the lines and then takes about 5 minutes to respond, by which stage you're kind of egging him on, and you're really hoping that he finishes the sentence before dying on screen in front of you.
Yeah, there is a bit of a sense of that. The reviews were actually quite. I looked up the reviews; they were quite mixed. I mean, it kind of gets a pass as a lively romp, right? According to Caine, it didn't go well in Britain. He reckons because they didn't see themselves sort of, as sort of pent up, stiff upper lip, kind of sexually regressive types, which they're not. He said. So I kind of translate that Caine wasn't a big fan, but he doesn't say much. He's never said much about The Wrong Box, I don't think.
It'd be easy just to say that this movie is dog shit and move on for that, but I think it's just to understand why it's dog shit. It's dog shit because the director doesn't understand comedy. The script isn't funny. The ensemble cast isn't great. You've got people, not acting as an ensemble. I would say Peter Sellers gives the best performance on the screen, but that's 5 minutes in there, and he's more or less on the screen by himself during that time. Caine is miscast. Caine isn't funny. He doesn't, like, I think at one stage in this he's required to fall over in a funny fashion, and he doesn't even manage to do that. He's just it's not a bone in his body essentially that he has. It's not
yet anyway.
He can reach for. Not yet, and obviously it's early days. But I mean, certainly at this stage, you'd imagine this may have put him off making comedies for a while.
Mm-hmm. I think, yeah, I you would imagine it did. I don't know. You don't know. I mean, God knows what was going through his mind at this stage. Probably time to move on from The Wrong Box, I think. But before we do, I'll just tell you one yarn before I forget.
Yarn me up. Good story, Daddy.
Yeah, I will. I'll do my best. Mentioning at the top there that Jeremy Lloyd, who would have written Hello, Hello, and Are You Being Served? And at the time, actually, I think around this time, Rowan and Martin would have brought him in to write for The Laugh-In America. Interesting fella.
Good. I'm glad you got that reference in there. Otherwise, we wouldn't have any millennials listening to this.
Yeah.
Stay for the Rowan and Martin laughing references, lads.
I'm back to the Battle of Balaclava. He plays one of the people killed before his time, who was part of the Tontine. He was killed at the Battle of Balaclava by some cannon shot from his own side. But anyway, so this scene is in the film, like he comes out the front and the cannon explodes and you see him fall forward. But apparently, after the loud explosion, according to his own autobiography, he was actually engulfed in flames from his waist up. He got 62 pieces of shrapnel into the back of his head and into his kind of lower left jaw. He was out of action for a year. And they left the scene in the film. So like, Jesus Christ, I was like, that's. And I went looking around just to see, because I was curious to see what Peter Cook or Dudley Moore thought of this film, or anybody. No one thought anything of it. Like, they literally didn't have a thought about it, apart from Jeremy Lloyd telling about his near-death experience.
Could you imagine being out of action professionally for a year because of a 5-second scene you shot for a film like The Wrong Box?
If it's a true story, and I mean, Jeremy Lloyd put it in his autobiography. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, he went off to America after that. He was actually invited to Sharon Tate's house the day that Sharon Tate was butchered by the Manson family, and he didn't. He didn't fetch up, and then he came back to America, or came back to the UK, and obviously wrote all those various different comedies that he became famous for. But I mean, that was where his acting career was at. 62 pieces of shrapnel in the back of the head out of The Wrong Box. We are going to give a mark out of Caine for every film, and again,
please, let's just wheel this fucking film into the Dignitas Clinic part of this fucking podcast, because I think we've discussed this film more than anybody else in the entire world has ever discussed The Wrong Box to this extent. I just want to inject the poison into its veins and hold its hand gently, pretending that I'm invested while not thinking about the large, Toblerone I'm going to get in duty free on the way home.
Yeah. We're going to gently euthanize this discussion now. So when we're giving the marks, just to explain to people again, if you're new to the podcast at all, I know why you jumped in for The Wrong Box. I do not know, but we're not marking the film as such. We're marking Caine's performance. But I tell you, I'll go first on this one this time. I really have tried to be sympathetic to him on this, but I cannot. I'm giving him 3.
Oh, I'm gonna give him a number 2.
Really? Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's a very low point, and it's incredible. It's incredible. And when you think what he's coming off, what people are watching him on screen, and he's coming off the back of his performance in Alfie, his performance in Ipcris, for people to see the wrong box. And the next film up is Gambit. So he's going, and this is like kind of this is the jump now, because he's going from sort of a kind of a British ensemble role, right? Gambit is his first show as a Hollywood leading man. I mean, the jump from one to the other is just, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, you're right. It's unbelievable that I can only imagine that whenever he got the offer for Gambit, they hadn't seen the wrong box. And I suppose he probably did benefit from the tight time frame here. It's not like things are now where all you have to do is do a quick internet search and see any movie that you want. I mean, back then they would have probably just seen the movies that he'd been lauded for, Zulu or Icarus or Alfie even, and they would the wrong box may not have been in the local movie theater where the producers were looking to cast him for Gambit or anything like that. So nobody would have seen this fucking movie when they were casting him for. But yeah, and again, this has been a learning experience for us all. Had I not done this podcast, I would never have watched The Wrong Box. So I say, it wasn't necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but it certainly broadened my horizons.
You're not inclined to quit?
No. I mean, you don't fall at the first hurdle. I'm sure there's many other hurdles along the way. Princess Diana gave up after that first landmine she cleared herself, or the first gentleman with A's that she touched. She wouldn't basically have saved all those people. So I know in a way I do see myself as the podcast's Princess of Hearts. So
yes, you certainly are the people's princess. All right, that's for sure. Like we won't, obviously we'll talk about this in much more detail as time in the next episode. But yeah, like Shirley MacLaine would have had the choice. It's Ipcris gets him the gig in Gambit. It's not the Wrong Box gets gig. The Wrong Box gets your career put in a box.
Yes, especially if you're Wilfred Lawson.
And on that bombshell, we're going to leave it. Come back next time for Gambit. Go find it. It's online. It's easy to find. Go watch it. Come back. We're going to discuss it next time around. Stephen, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And as usual, if you have any questions to ask us again, preferably about the movie itself rather than personal questions, because again, most of those have been hurtful so far. So if you can keep it on topic, any questions you'd like to ask us about Gambit, hit us up. I threw up in my mouth there. Hit us up on Twitter on at Malanews or at Michael Foley or whatever it is your Twitter handle is, or at Mark of Caine 2. As usual, fuck you, Mark of Caine 1.
We're going to find you, people.
What are you waiting for? Come on. Come on. What are you waiting for? Come on. Come on.